Hi, I'm Brendan Hemingway, founder of Pythia Cyber, and I'm here with my colleague Ted Hayes, who's also a founder of Pythia Cyber. And today I'm going to press him on his assertion that risk management is relationship management. So why don't you give us a brief overview, and then I have a specific question I want to ask you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for watching our video. We're going to talk about risk management. We're going to talk about relationship management. We all hear as we go through our working lives that there is no reward without risk. And that's largely true most of the time. Now, at extreme levels of risk, maybe there is no reward. Extreme levels of lack of risk, there certainly is no reward. And so in the middle of it is where we find that things can be not only rewarding from a monetary perspective or an outcome perspective, but also from an emotional perspective. There are different ways to think about that risk and managing it. There's internal and there's external. And when we think about external, that's where it's about the relationship part. If you're in a team and your team is engaging in behavior that rubs up against another team, maybe urges them to do things faster or better, that creates some risk that there's going to be friction. This is a normal feature of working life. Every one of us who's ever worked in a team where there are other teams, you know that the other teams maybe aren't always as consistent as your team is. And so that back and forth means that from a performance management perspective, organizational leadership needs to anticipate that there's going to be friction and anticipate how it will manage that friction. And how it's going to manage that friction is through relationship management. Because if it doesn't manage the friction, it doesn't manage the risk that results from the friction. So you want to have that reward from the risk by getting different individuals in different teams, different business units to work together more productively from a relationship perspective. At some levels, this is about revising your performance management plan. At other levels, this is about having a term that we've used in another video, psychological safety, the permission, if you will, to challenge another person productively, have them challenge you in a way that creates an outcome as opposed to just causes conflict. So those of you who have ever been involved with debates, you may appreciate how there's something that comes out of the to and fro of debating, and this is a good model of it. There's also relationship management between different groups at the benchmarking level. So many times, those of us that done feedback to organizations uh, will have a manager say something like, how does this compare to the industry average? Which always makes, one hair on my head go gray because you know that what they're really doing is saying, this isn't as bad as those other people's, is it? And so they're just trying to hide from something. So what we want to do with relationship management in each one of those places is to manage, acknowledge that there's going to be risk. The risk is going to come from fiction. Sometimes that's competition. Sometimes that's permission to say things to other people that challenges them. Sometimes it's about operating more in sync and paying more attention. But the relationship management part of risk management is what leads to the rewards.
And that all makes sense, but here's an example from my own career that I'm looking for some specific advice on. And at a gross level, I guess I'm asking how you manage up and sideways, how you manage your relationship with your boss or with your peers. But a lot of what I do is IT consulting, which means I'm sort of external and I'm sort of internal. And I have a strange relationship with my colleagues, my temporary colleagues, because I'm kind of a peer and I'm kind of not. And I find that doing the work I do, especially with an eye to cybersecurity, I run into operational procedures which are adequate and reasonable from an operations perspective, but which are lacking from a cybersecurity perspective. And I feel inhibited, I feel that it's a difficult that it's going to be more trouble than it's worth for me to say to a pseudo colleague after I've tried hinting that maybe they want to change their software practices or their software's behavior. After I've tried hinting to them, I don't know if I want to go to the next level and say, what you're doing has some drawbacks in a realm you don't seem to think about ever. And I certainly don't want to go to their boss because it feels like I'm tattling on them and saying, that programmer's a good programmer, but they keep opening so like accepting connections from different hosts without checking to see if those hosts are on a white list and they don't, and other sort of programming practice things which don't stop their software from working, doesn't currently, so far as I know, hurt the network, but it sounds like whining or tattling. So I assume part of what you're talking about is that I don't have a framework in which to say we agree that we're trying to stop risks and here's a risk, which I feel would be make it less personal.
So part of what you're talking about is the appearance of tattling on someone, which is just never a good idea. It it just creates retaliation, and people are good at retaliation. Apes are good at retaliation. So let's not do retaliation. But what it also speaks to is the idea of setting up expectations that there's going to be there's going to be some differences of opinion. I mean, at a high level, it's conflict, but there are going to be differences of opinion, and they could both have an element of being correct. Again, I come back to a debating process where the pro and the con each have valid points, and they're trying to create the best possible case for their version of things. Now, from a cybersecurity perspective, things aren't always black and white, right? So risks don't always raise a flag and say, "Hey, look at me! I'm a risk. I'm a someone who's trying to steal your stuff." So I yeah, I think what you're talking to is a change of perspective from leadership that it's not just about operational integrity. And sure, that's important, but things can be broken into while they're operating just fine, as you know. Um, what really matters if you're thinking of this from a cybersecurity perspective is that you're willing to challenge what seems to be perfectly operating software and ask people to take a risk and think about it from a different perspective. So it's giving you and your team and the people you're working with permission to think outside of your professional equities that are in your job description more broadly toward the security of the organization and its cyber assets.
So this is what I think this is a nice illustration then of what we're talking about, which people sometimes misunderstand us when we say cybersecurity is everybody's job. We don't mean it's all everybody does, but we mean it often touches them. Because what I'd really like to get to, and we talked about ways in which practically you get to, is I'd love to be able to say without fear of starting a fight or taking anybody off, I wouldn't do that if I were you, and have a space in which someone feels comfortable to say, I hear you. Given my current priorities, I can't get to it, or I don't think it's important, but we'll put it on a list or something. I really don't want to have a debate about whether the thing I'm suggesting is valid or not, because all of these practices, best practices, are obviously valid. It doesn't mean everybody should do them all the time, but as a consultant, I feel that it caught because I want them to make an informed decision. And and
Yes.
and I don't know how to bring that up, but you're saying it's not so much a matter of knowing how to bring it up, it's that the environment has to support that idea.
The environment has to support that idea. That's how equitable decisions get made, equitable from the perspective of ethical and moral. It's how our values get played out because we agree that we're working toward managing cybersecurity risk. As long as we understand that that's our larger goal, then business units, individual people, different teams can understand that there are going to be times when you disagree and you could both be partly right, but from the perspective of cybersecurity, which is everybody's business, you have to prioritize it. And when you prioritize that, then things line up relative to the number one priority, and you're able to accomplish your business outcomes or your individual daily dealings, understanding that there are superordinate goals that you're working toward, maybe at different speeds or different levels of influence, but it's really important. So if we're working in a school system and we want to guard security of student information, you might have to challenge people who are doing things maybe that are a little bit more risky. And that's okay because you're not doing it because you're saying the other person is wrong or bad, but you're doing it because the bigger goal is to ensure the integrity of student information. So that's an example. And we know this from uh, working in organizations, and there are different business units. They have different interests. There's operations, there's sales, there's technology. They all have different needs for capital internally. They're in competition for it. So if we make cybersecurity part of the conversation so that all these different business units understand that there is a shared goal of cybersecurity in addition to a shared goal of maximizing their own unit's performance, then that balances things out and provides a context for that conversation at the leadership level.
Excellent. I very much resonate with you saying balance because I've so rarely seen this done in a balanced way. I've seen organizations that say we were desperately trying to get something out the door and ship it, so you're going to need to stop whining until we do that. And I've seen organizations, if it's a development organizations, I've seen organizations like banks that are totally on the other side. Oh, you've raised some slight concern, so we're going to stop everything everywhere until we find out what about it. And I really would love to work in more environments where you can say, I find this troubling. And someone can say, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. It is a problem. We need to think, but we've assessed the risk. And currently, the resources required to fix this are not worth that. And have it be a not a personal, not a me saying you did something bad. Another programmer saying, it's not bad. You're wrong, which is a conversation I've had so many times, and it's just so utterly pointless. But about even having the vocabulary to say, I think this is risky, and have someone say, we will then put it into our risk management program and see what level of effort is necessary or required or allowed or available to fix it. And in the past, I know over the years we've known each other, I've said, what's a good strategy for this? And I was horrified at how often you said, there is no strategy where an individual player can fix a broken game. So that's why we put a emphasis on behavioral science, because painful as it is for people to hear, sometimes the answer is your six small questions would be fixed by a significant change in the way you people manage your relationship with each other.
That's what it comes down to. We manage relationships professionally and respectfully because the alternative, and we all know this, we are social animals, and it doesn't take very much observation or reflection to notice countries, people, uh, different companies that retaliate against each other don't have a larger perspective, fixate on slights, and get into retribution. And while, that, okay, we're social animals, we do that, it's the nature of the game we play at some level. Um, you don't have to do that. And not only do you not have to do that, you shouldn't do that if you're talking about cybersecurity, because that detracts from the organization's ability to manage its risk from cybersecurity. So I invite our viewers to send us an email. Tell us what you think about this conversation. Tell us
Leave a
about a time.
comment on the video.
Leave a comment. Yeah, let us know because I think this is a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate the technologist aspect of it. I've certainly lived through different pieces of it where we had to drop everything and do something and it involved a whole weekend. And, we've all had that happen, right? So tell us about your perspective on risk management and relationship management. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.